Late one night, in a small town hospital, a nurse named Emily was making her rounds. The hospital was eerily quiet, the fluorescent lights flickering intermittently, casting long, dancing shadows down the deserted hallways. Emily had been assigned to the old wing of the hospital, a section that hadn't been used in years except for storage. It was a place that staff and patients alike avoided, but tonight she had no choice. As she entered the old wing, she felt a chill run down her spine. The air was noticeably colder, and the silence was oppressive. She could hear her own footsteps echoing off the walls as she walked past rooms filled with outdated medical equipment and dusty furniture. The flickering lights above cast an unsettling glow. Halfway down the corridor, she heard a faint whisper. Emily stopped, straining her ears to listen. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, though she couldn't make out the words. Her heart pounded in her chest as she followed the sound, leading her to an old patient room at the end of the hall. The door to the room was slightly ajar, and the whispering seemed to be coming from inside. Taking a deep breath, Emily pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, the only light coming from the flickering hallway lights spilling through the doorway. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw an old hospital bed in the center of the room, covered in a thin layer of dust. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. The silence was deafening. Emily felt a presence in the room, and she turned to see a figure standing in the corner. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned hospital gown, her hair matted and eyes hollow. Emily's blood ran cold as the figure began to move towards her. The woman's mouth opened, and a guttural, inhuman voice emanated from her lips. "You shouldn't be here," it hissed. Emily stumbled backward, her heart racing. The figure continued to advance, her movements jerky and unnatural. In a panic, Emily turned and fled from the room, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As she ran, she could hear the whispers following her, growing louder and more insistent. She didn't stop until she reached the newer part of the hospital, where the lights were bright and the sounds of the modern world drowned out the haunting whispers. Breathless and shaking, Emily tried to explain what had happened to her colleagues, but no one believed her. They dismissed her story as the result of an overactive imagination and the eerie atmosphere of the old wing. But Emily knew what she had seen, and she vowed never to return to that part of the hospital again. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen in the hospital. Lights flickered more frequently, and odd noises echoed through the halls at night. Some patients claimed to see a ghostly figure wandering the corridors, and staff reported hearing whispers when they were alone. The old wing was eventually sealed off for good, but the whispers never truly stopped. To this day, those who dare to venture too close can still hear the faint, chilling whispers of the hospital's haunted past.
In the heart of a sprawling city, St. Augustine's Hospital loomed large, a beacon of hope and healing by day. But by night, it was a place of shadows and secrets. On a particularly cold and stormy evening, Dr. Sarah Walker was assigned the night shift. A seasoned physician, Sarah had heard the rumors about the hospital's peculiarities during the night, but she dismissed them as superstitions. The night began uneventfully, the usual hum of machines and the occasional moan of patients filling the air. Around midnight, the power flickered, plunging the hospital into temporary darkness. The backup generators kicked in almost immediately, but the sudden darkness left an uneasy feeling in its wake. Sarah decided to make her rounds, hoping the familiar routine would calm her nerves. As she walked the dimly lit corridors, she noticed something strange. The usually bustling hallways were eerily quiet, and the few patients she passed seemed more agitated than usual. In the pediatric ward, she heard a soft sobbing. Following the sound, she found a little girl sitting on the edge of her bed, her face buried in her hands. Sarah approached gently. "Hey there, sweetie. What's wrong?" The girl looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I saw him again," she whispered. "Who did you see?" Sarah asked, kneeling down to be at eye level with the girl. "The tall man. He stands at the end of my bed and just watches me." Sarah felt a chill. "Where is he now?" The girl pointed towards the corner of the room. Sarah turned but saw nothing. "It's okay, sweetie. There's no one there. It's just your imagination." The girl shook her head vehemently. "No, he's real. He's always here at night." Sarah tried to reassure her, promising to check on her frequently. As she left the room, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Deciding to investigate, she asked the night nurse, Linda, if she had heard of the tall man. Linda's face paled. "You saw him too?" Sarah was taken aback. "What do you mean too?" Linda led her to a small office and closed the door. "There's a legend about this place. Years ago, a doctor named Richard Hargrove worked here. He was brilliant but obsessed with finding a cure for a rare disease. He conducted unauthorized experiments on patients, many of whom were children. When his activities were discovered, he disappeared. But his ghost is said to haunt the hospital, particularly the pediatric ward." Sarah felt a mixture of disbelief and fear. "That's just a story." Linda shook her head. "Too many people have seen him for it to be just a story." Determined to find a rational explanation, Sarah decided to check the hospital's old records. In the dusty archives, she found files on Dr. Richard Hargrove. The reports were disturbing, detailing unethical experiments and patient deaths. One entry stood out. The last known sighting of Dr. Hargrove before he vanished was in the very room where the little girl now stayed. Feeling a growing sense of dread, Sarah returned to the pediatric ward. As she approached the girl's room, she saw a shadowy figure standing at the end of the bed. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, and wore what looked like an old-fashioned doctor's coat. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the figure turned to look at her, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Summoning all her courage, Sarah stepped into the room. "You're not real," she said, her voice trembling. The figure didn't move, just stared at her with those piercing eyes. The little girl looked up at Sarah, her face filled with fear. "He's here," she whispered. In a moment of clarity, Sarah remembered an old remedy for restless spirits, acknowledging their pain. "Dr. Hargrove," she said, addressing the figure, "your work caused much suffering. The children forgive you. It's time to rest." The figure flickered, its form becoming less solid. For a moment, the eyes softened, and then the figure disappeared, leaving the room feeling lighter, almost peaceful. The little girl looked at Sarah with wide eyes. "Is he gone?" Sarah nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "Yes, he's gone." The rest of the night passed without incident, and by morning, the hospital had returned to its usual state. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had witnessed something extraordinary. She decided to stay on the night shift, keeping an eye out for any other restless spirits. St. Augustine's Hospital continued to operate, its halls filled with the hustle and bustle of daily life. But those who worked the night shift knew that sometimes, when the lights flickered and the shadows grew long, the past would reach out, reminding them that some stories are not just tales, but lingering echoes of the lives once lived.